Maybe try being less direct next time. Lucas muttered without looking up from his phone, thumbs scrolling like whatever I just said was a pop-up ad interrupting his meditation playlist. We were in a vendor call. His cousin, now mysteriously the VP of Experience, had just derailed the quarterly onboarding schedule with a redesign based on vibes and color wheels. I pointed out calmly that it would delay procurement by 6 weeks and break 2 SLAs. Lucas winced like I'd farted at a funeral. "We're evolving," he said, folding his hands like a monk who didn't understand EBITDA. "Let's try to wayo feel less corporate." I'd spent 5 years helping build Varian Dynamics from a spreadsheet and sweat operation in a WeWork closet to a streamlined logistics interface that made actual money. I was operations advisor on paper, but in practice, I was the one who untangled every logistics snarl, massaged vendor egos back into partnerships, and automated their entire delivery forecasting stack when everyone else was still arguing over logo font. Lucas liked to pretend it all happened by osmosis, like he sneezed out synergy and it turned into margin. He'd joke in board meetings, "Just don't let her near clients. She's a little confrontational." Funny thing is, I never raised my voice, never lost my cool. What they called confrontational was just clarity. No coddling, no corporate poetry, just facts. You'd be amazed how fragile egos get when a woman doesn't dilute the truth in sparkle emojis. But I didn't need applause. I needed process. I needed things to work. So I kept my head down, kept the engine running, and quietly made sure my consulting LLC held the keys. Literally. Every vendor license, every API, every renewal clause, all filed, logged, and legally under my company. They wanted advisory? I gave them structure. I also gave myself leverage, not that anyone noticed. If you're the kind of person who actually enjoys watching people like this trip over their own branding decks, hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of you listen without subscribing, but it keeps stories like this going. And trust me, you're gonna want to hear how this ends. Back to it. The first time I knew something was shifting, something small like the edge of a tectonic plate, you'd miss it if you weren't listening. Lucas had just come back from some founder retreat in Tulum. He wore bracelets now, started replacing Slack threads with mood boards, said things like, "Let's not lead with friction, let's lead with feeling." That's when the agency showed up. Smooth-talking kids with ring lights and ironic mustaches who pitched a rebrand as recalibrating the emotional texture of logistics. I asked if that included not missing our supplier invoice reconciliation deadline. They blinked. Lucas laughed. "See? She's spicy." Then came the cousin. Taylor ran a cafe for 6 years, which apparently made him an experience-first strategist. His first move was to suggest we deprioritize data dashboards in the vendor portal because they're intimidating. He wanted a homepage with moving clouds. I told him if he wanted clouds, he should look outside. Vendors needed numbers. His second move? Suggesting my process decks were technocratic artifacts. His words. 2 days later, Lucas forwarded me a rewritten org chart. My authority on vendor renewals was now advisory only. I replied, "Noted." Then I logged into my LLC retainer portal and quietly updated one clause, just one. Termination of my contract by either party would automatically revoke all vendor access, portal rights, and back-end infrastructure associated with my systems. No fanfare. Just a quiet change. Time-stamped. Stored. Binding. Because I'd learned something over those 5 years. The louder they bragged, the less they read. And Lucas never read anything that didn't have a bar graph or a GIF in it. From the outside, I was still showing up, running syncs, adjusting pipelines, letting Taylor install his bubble font dashboard mockups like a toddler rearranging tools in a mechanic's garage. But inside, I was documenting everything, downloading backups, archiving decision trees, watching the train slowly tilt, and waiting, not for revenge, for the moment clarity would finally matter again. That moment came faster than I thought. "We're rebranding," Lucas said, barefoot in the conference room, sipping some neon adaptogenic nightmare in a mason jar. "It's a vibe thing." I thought he was kidding. Then he slid a pitch deck across the table. Lavender gradient, Comic Sans quotes about mindfulness, and a slogan that made me want to peel my own frontal lobe like an orange. Logistics, but make it feel like a hug. You ever watch someone try to spiritually gentrify freight coordination? That's what this was. I sat there, blinking at a slide titled Rebirthing the Journey with a looping animation of a butterfly morphing into a delivery drone. Lucas was glowing. His cousin Taylor, yes, the cafe guy, nodded like he was witnessing divine revelation. He wore a scarf indoors and had recently updated his LinkedIn to say, Human-Centric Alchemist. Lucas clasped his hands and said, You've done incredible work, obviously, but your tone, it can be a little sharp. We want to soften that. Be more welcoming. He looked at me like I was a porch light scaring off the moths. I didn't argue. I just sat back in the chair, felt the air conditioner wheeze against my spine, and let them float away on their buzzwords. They were replacing operational clarity with mood lighting. Of course, I wasn't welcome. They were building a brand that couldn't survive eye contact. The agency guy, some bearded failson named Jasper, asked me if we could make the vendor login less intimidating. I asked what he meant. He said, it's got a lot of buttons. It's a vendor dashboard, Jasper, not a juice cleanse. By the following week, Taylor was signing off on portal redesigns and vendor interface updates. My signature authority had been reassigned to him per Lucas's executive alignment strategy. I got the memo via Slack, attached to a Canva graphic of two hands reaching toward each other like a bad church flyer. Caption: Experience starts with trust. The CFO pinged me later, saying he assumed I'd still own execution on the back end, meaning they wanted me to do all the work, but Taylor would approve it and get the credit. It was like being told the surgeon now reports to the guy who once made a decent cappuccino. Still, I said nothing, because silence doesn't mean surrender. Silence is where you sharpen the knife. That night, I logged into my consulting LLC dashboard and opened the contract Lucas had e-signed 5 years ago in a rush, probably during a yoga class, judging by the timestamp. I added one clause, just one. Upon termination by either party, my services would cease, and with them, any access, credentials, or technical continuity associated with the infrastructure I had built. Vendor portals, cloud keys, API routing, logistics mapping, all under my control, all tied to my LLC's ownership. It wasn't hidden, just buried under Exhibit C contingencies. After I signed the amendment and stored the updated retainer, I backed up every vendor credential I'd provisioned, exported key sequences, encrypted the configs, and smiled. Not because I was planning anything, because planning was already done. Lucas wanted to lead with feeling. I was about to show him how it felt to build your castle on borrowed bricks. In meetings, I played along, nodded through wellness-forward logistics brainstorming, pretended I didn't notice Taylor changing dashboard colors to emotionally intelligent greens, kept approving updates like nothing was wrong. Meanwhile, vendor reps were getting twitchy. They couldn't get answers from Taylor. One called me directly after a call where he said, "Let's circle back to that spiritual pain point," when asked about Q4 shipment buffers. "I'm out," the vendor whispered. "This guy thinks lead time is a personality trait." I told her I understood. I always understood. What Lucas couldn't see, was that every cheerful revision chipped away at the foundation. Logistics doesn't care about vibes. Logistics runs on discipline, foresight, and execution. He had traded all three for a brand guide with a mood board titled Sunrise Over Intuition. And I just waited. My hands were already off the wheel. My clause was in place. The train was still moving, sure, but the tracks had started to vanish, and Lucas was too busy naming the clouds to notice. 6:18 a.m. Tuesday. Phone lit up like it owed me money. Lucas. I didn't answer right away, just stared at the screen while the fan in my bedroom hummed like it was trying to warn me. Sixth sense kind of quiet. You know that feeling when everything's calm in a way that makes your bones itch? That's what it felt like. A chill that didn't belong to the morning. I picked up. Lucas's voice was so composed, so PR polished it could have been AI generated. "Hey," he said, like he hadn't been rehearsing it all weekend. "Just wanted to touch base early. We're going in a new direction." There was a pause. He was waiting for me to say something. I didn't. He filled the silence like he always did. "It's not about your performance. You're effective, absolutely. But some folks feel your tone is confrontational." And that's just not the energy we want as we evolve. Evolve. Like logistics was Pokemon and I'd somehow missed the part where we turned into feelings. Still, I said nothing. Didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't remind him how many fires I'd put out or contracts I'd salvaged or margins I'd widened while his cousin was busy picking pastel palettes for dashboard UI. I just reached over, opened my laptop, and pulled up a file named Departure. Full. The first line. If you're reading this, it's already started. 6:22 a.m. 2 minutes after the call, my Slack access blinked out. Company inbox disabled. Dashboard login dead. They were fast. I gave them credit. 6:24 a.m. I clicked a single button. Initiate clause 4C disengagement protocol. The moment I hit confirm, I felt nothing. Not rage, not panic, not sadness, just stillness, like watching a download bar crawl slowly toward 100% while the world thinks it's buffering. The clause did exactly what I designed it to do. Vendor credentials revoked. Cloud integrations decoupled. API keys scrambled and disabled. Warehouse inventory tracker sandboxed into read only. My system didn't crash theirs. That would have been petty. It just stopped talking to them, like a limb that no longer answered the brain. Because every pipeline, every process flow, every elegant little automation they used to brag about in board meetings, those were built on my infrastructure, tied to my licenses, written in code hosted under my LLC. They wanted clean energy? Well, I powered down cleanly. By 6:26 a.m., the first ping came in. A vendor portal auto response. Access revoked. Contact administrator. I watched it happen in real time, not out of spite, just curiosity, like watching dominoes fall and wondering if they'll skip a tile. 6:29 a.m. A warehouse scanner went offline. 6:31 a.m. The route optimizer threw a warning. Endpoint unreachable. I didn't need to be in their office to hear the panic build. I knew the rhythm. First, it's a mild, weird. Then it's Slack DMs, then calls. Then Taylor trying to reboot things he doesn't understand. Then Lucas yelling from a glass office about why nothing's working. Me? I poured a cup of coffee, black, no emotion, no cream. My cat walked across the table, sat right next to my laptop like she sensed the vibe had shifted. She stared at me. I stared back. I whispered, "It's begun." Because once a system unplugs from its brain, it doesn't burn. It drifts, and drift is worse than fire. You can explain a fire. You can't explain why nothing moves, and I didn't have to lift a single finger after that. Everything that came next, that was just gravity. 7:04 a.m. First ripple. One of our top-tier freight vendors emailed Lucas directly. Per our agreement with my LLC, your contract access has been terminated. Please provide updated credentials and authorized contact for renewal pathway. 7 minutes later, a cold chain tracking partner escalated. No active API response. Is this scheduled maintenance? Lucas didn't answer. Not yet. I imagined him standing in the middle of his open concept office, barefoot again probably, staring at his phone like it had turned into a foreign object. The man thought contracts were more of a suggestion than a structure. Turns out, structure doesn't care what you think. 7:21. Our internal warehouse integration dashboard pinged its last successful handshake. After that, silence. The status indicators flickered from green to yellow, then red, then blank. Not offline, just orphaned. And that's the part most of them never understand. A system doesn't fail like a movie explosion. It's quiet, methodical. A scan times out, an update fails. A warehouse loader stands there, blinking at a frozen screen, wondering if it's a glitch. It's not. It's the oxygen leaving the room one molecule at a time. By 7:40 a.m., Lucas caved. Texted me. Lucas, 7:40 a.m. Hey, I think some of your processes got swept in the transition. Vendors say their access is invalid. Can you send over the updated credentials? I didn't rush. Let him feel it. Let him walk the edge of that cliff and look down. At 7:52, I forwarded a single PDF page. It was titled Termination Access Protocol, Exhibit C Revocation Framework. No greeting, no sign-off. Just a highlighted clause, paragraph 4C. Upon contract termination, all access rights and operational dependencies, technical or otherwise, revert to licensor. Reestablishment requires new agreement. No emoji, no punctuation outside of what the clause required, just clean legal oxygen. He didn't respond right away. Probably read it, reread it, forwarded it to his agency's legal team who hadn't been looped in until now because it was just a vibe shift. Meanwhile, vendor after vendor echoed down his inbox like sonar. Please confirm reauthorization. Existing login rejected. Do you have updated credentials? Unable to fulfill current shipments. Dashboard inaccessible. Each message was a little softer, a little more cautious. Vendors know instability when they see it, and they can smell leadership scrambling. At 8:10 a.m., the internal IT team began pinging Taylor. I saw one of them post in the company's help forum, still public-facing at the time. Why were integrations tied to a third-party LLC? Was this intentional? That post disappeared within an hour, but the screenshot lives forever. At 8:37 a.m., Lucas tried calling. Twice. I let it ring. 3 times, and he might have figured I was driving. 5, and he'd know I wasn't picking up for him. He sent another text. Lucas, 8:41 a.m. This is fixable, right? Like we can bring you in to sort it out? He still didn't get it. This wasn't a broken toy. This was a dismantled engine, one bolt at a time, each piece cataloged and filed away behind a clause he never read. He thought he fired me. What he actually did was terminate access to the very spine of his company. By 9:00 a.m., vendor Slack channels were lighting up with messages to the Ops team. Client account revoked. Who's the new administrator? Compliance key expired. Are you issuing replacements? Taylor, bless him, responded to one. We're rebranding. We'll get back to you soon. I choked on my coffee, laughing. Rebranding? You don't paint the house while it's burning, sweetheart. By late morning, they were rerouting support calls through the branding agency's office line. Jasper, the vibe guy, tried to triage a shipping delay by asking one of our cold chain vendors if they'd tried refreshing their browser. By noon, 2 of their warehouses switched to manual entry mode, staff printing out PDFs and filling forms by hand like it was 1997. One of the vendor managers, someone I'd worked with closely, called me directly, off the record. Her voice was calm, but beneath it, curiosity. I'm not asking for gossip, she said. But, was this part of the plan? I paused, then told her the truth. No, this was part of the contract. And that's the difference between sabotage and sovereignty. One is chaos, the other is consequences. 8:17 a.m., my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Lucas or a vendor or one of Taylor's panicked interns asking why the dashboard was showing zeros instead of smiles. It was LinkedIn. Message from someone I didn't recognize right away. David Arnett, SVP of Ops at Torquebridge Logistics. I'd seen his name in passing over the years, mostly through whispered competitor comparisons. Torquebridge had always been a quiet giant. Precise, well-capitalized, methodical. The kind of company that didn't flash billboards, but somehow still landed national contracts while everyone else was pitching with sock puppets and sizzle reels. His message was short, just 4 sentences. Word travels fast. We've admired your systems for years. Seems like now might be a good time to talk. Lunch? I stared at the screen. The timing was too clean, the tone too sharp to be coincidence. They knew. Maybe not the details, but enough. They'd been watching. I replied instantly. Make it brunch. By 8:20 we were on a call. He didn't waste time on small talk. Tell me what you built. Tell me what broke. Then tell me how you do it better. I didn't hold back. I told him how I restructured Virion's entire vendor hierarchy to reduce latency and cut their SLA violations in half. How I built a modular routing matrix that scaled across 3 tiers of carrier class. How every tool, every sequence, every dashboard was designed for clarity, not aesthetic, and how Lucas threw it all out for a rebrand with more purple gradients and fewer buttons. David didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he just said, "Our COO is retiring this quarter. We hadn't announced it yet." Silence hung in the air. Then, "Come meet the team. I'll send a car." By 9:05, I was walking into their headquarters. Clean lines, subtle branding, no mood boards in sight. Real professionals. A woman at reception handed me a badge. Visitor, strategic. Not guest, not applicant. Strategic. The meeting wasn't an interview, it was an alignment check. They showed me their org chart, tech stack, current bottlenecks. I walked them through 2 solution paths off the cuff. Their CTO leaned back, scribbled something down, and nodded once. That solves the weekend redundancies. At 10:17 a.m., they gave me a tour. No neon buzzwords on the wall, no avocado-themed break room, just rows of focused teams, dashboards running real-time metrics, and floor managers who looked at me like they knew who I was already. At 11:41 a.m., David walked me to a corner office, unfurnished, facing east, subtle plaque on the door still covered in plastic. "We'd like you to take this," he said. COO reporting to me, autonomy guaranteed. I stared at the skyline through the glass, not because it was breathtaking, because it was clean, straightforward, no filters. I said yes. No dramatic handshake, no balloons. Just a quiet contract slid across the table, and the moment I signed it, I felt nothing like revenge. It was air, cool, crisp, free of fog. They hadn't poached me, they'd waited, and when the noise died down, they'd opened the door. Lucas thought he'd taken something from me at 6:18 a.m. He never realized I had somewhere better to be by 11:41. By 12:13 p.m., the panic had gone public. Their Slack channels, once filled with moodboard mockups and Monday motivation gifts, were now thread after thread of troubleshooting chaos. Messages like, "Anyone know how the warehouse routing was configured pre-Jasper update? Does anyone have access to the old vendor timeline tool? I think it was called Map Nest? Taylor says we should do a manual reset. What does that mean?" And my personal favorite, "Can we contact her?" Or, "Legally, is that a problem now?" The answer was yes, and also yes. By mid-afternoon, their operations team had realized something that should have been obvious years ago, but had been blissfully ignored for the sake of founder ego and pastel optimism. I was the system, not figuratively. Literally. Every license they used to access their vendors was provisioned through my consulting LLC. Every integration, Zapier chains, API routes, fulfillment webhooks was mapped on my dashboards. The inventory reconciliations, my automation sequences, carrier rollup logic, written and deployed from my sandbox. I didn't build it that way out of spite. I built it that way because no one else could. Lucas wanted a plug-and-play machine without understanding you still need to wire the damn thing before it turns on. At 2:04 p.m., I got the call. Lucas. Again. This time his voice was a little less rehearsed, less calm. There was a hollow edge to it, like he'd just realized the thing he used to joke about in meetings. "Don't let her near clients, she's intense," had become the only reason clients hadn't already jumped ship. "Hey," he said, exhaling hard. "Okay, listen, I know this has been disruptive. We just need to stabilize. Could you maybe just send over the credentials? We can figure the rest out later." I let the silence stretch, not because I was being cruel, but because I wanted him to sit in it. Then, evenly, I replied, "Sure, I just need a new contract." Pause. "A what?" "A new contract," I said. "Through TorqueBridge, they hold my services now. Any system-level reentry would need to be negotiated between your legal and theirs." Silence again. This one longer. He hadn't expected that. Lucas had always assumed I was just an asset he could toggle off and on, fire the consultant, bring in a friendlier one. What he never accounted for was that my ownership wasn't emotional, it was structural. And now, contractual. TorqueBridge had been quiet so far, professional, unbothered. But if Lucas tried to spin this, tried to hack around what I'd built or redirect dependencies through alternate logins, TorqueBridge would step in. And that wasn't something Lucas wanted, because TorqueBridge read contracts. "Right," he finally muttered. "Well, let me talk to legal." I nodded, though he couldn't see it. "Sure, let me know if you'd like TorqueBridge's counsel to loop in." Click. By 3:15, he tried a backdoor attempt. One of Taylor's interns attempted to manually reset the logistics dashboard by importing an old copy of a tool I deprecated 6 months earlier. It crashed mid-load and sent a false delivery confirmation to 4 vendors. One of them, not amused, replied, "Your portal just confirmed a 4,000 unit shipment that doesn't exist. Fix this or we're done." Taylor's reply? A gif of a shrugging panda. I wish I were kidding. By the time the sun started to set, internal morale was unraveling. One warehouse supervisor leaked a screenshot of a Taylor email that read, "We're transitioning into a more agile, feeling-driven workflow. Let's not obsess over the past." The past? The past had the working infrastructure. Meanwhile, Torquebridge had quietly onboarded two of my original vendors, both of whom reached out independently. Their messages were nearly identical. "We trust you. Let us know if you need anything." Trust isn't built with slogans. It's built in the dead hours of the night when systems don't crash because someone cared enough to design them right the first time. Lucas never understood that. Taylor still didn't. And now, the only person who could help was under a different banner. Mine. With Torquebridge stamped in clean Helvetica at the bottom of every page. Friday morning, 9:32 a.m., Torquebridge posted a team update on LinkedIn. Just a simple banner image. Navy blue, minimal typography, no sparkles or sunrise gradients. The kind of post that doesn't scream for attention because it knows it already has it. Welcoming our new COO, bringing decades of process resilience and operational integrity. My name sat there in white font. No exclamation marks. No hashtags about girl bossing, just the facts. And in that silence, the entire comment section lit up. Vendors I'd worked with for years dropped subtle congratulations. A few rival firms added fire emojis. Someone from Virion, anonymous behind a gray profile photo, simply wrote, "Finally, a real operator." Then came Lucas. He commented like a man still trying to maintain the illusion of control, the tone light but laced with insecurity so thick it bled through the screen. Lucas Bright. Didn't know we were sharing talent now. I sat at my new desk, real wood, no LED trim, no beanbags in sight, and stared at that sentence. Sharing talent, as if I'd been on loan, as if this was all just a passing misunderstanding, as if he hadn't fired me over the phone like I was a squeaky hinge on a door he wanted replaced with one that invited more light. A few people replied with the polite laughs, standard LinkedIn noise, but then David, Torquebridge's CEO, chimed in. One line. David Arnett, CEO, Torquebridge. We're not. We're building what you couldn't retain. No flourish, no dragging, just precision. And with that, the thread went silent. No one replied. No one needed to. The subtext did all the talking. She wasn't stolen. She was released. You had her, and you didn't know what she was worth until your warehouses went dark and your vendors stopped returning your calls. Lucas didn't reply. Not publicly, not privately. He probably sat there in his ideation lounge or whatever that rebranded corner of his office was called now, rereading David's comment like it might change if he blinked hard enough. Meanwhile, inside Torquebridge, the welcome wasn't performative. It was structured. My onboarding packet had real content. My team leads weren't cousins of executives. They were specialists. No mood boards, just roadmap decks. We didn't talk about synergy. We talked about load balancing, predictive SLAs, and scaling without margin bleed. I met with every department that week. Quiet conversations, deep dives. One by one, they handed me their bottlenecks, their buried inefficiencies, their frustration with systems that didn't talk to each other. And I listened. Took notes, drew workflows by hand. By Friday evening, I'd already signed off on 2 operational overhauls that would shave 11% off annual overhead. No meetings about it, just action. One of the directors looked at me across the table, eyebrows raised. "You've done more in 4 days than the last guy did in 4 quarters. I just smiled. It's amazing what happens when you let ops people run ops. Back on LinkedIn, the Torquebridge post quietly climbed into trending status for our industry tag, not because of hype, because everyone knew what that post really meant. The person who'd built the backbone of a startup was now at a firm that respected the spine, not just the skin. No revenge, no press interviews, no exposés, just alignment. Quiet, exact, and irreversible. The kind of return that doesn't knock. It owns the key. By week 4, we weren't just back online. We were ahead. Torquebridge gave me full autonomy, and I used it like a scalpel. No more bending workflows to suit branding tone. No more watching ops pipelines get filtered through pastel mood boards and caffeinated cousins. Just clarity, flow, execution. My first act was replication. Not revenge, just restoration. We mapped every vendor chain I had ever built, brick by brick. But this time, we made them sharper, cleaner, resilient. The cold chain sequence now had temperature deviation alerts with real-time rerouting suggestions baked in. The delivery forecast system, built with predictive buffers for seasonality that reduced our Q3 variance margin by 6.4%. Even the warehouse sync protocols, what used to be stitched together through legacy tools and my midnight sanity, were now fully integrated into a dynamic logistics intelligence layer. And this time, it wasn't just mine. I documented everything, every process, every trigger, every fallback condition. My team, handpicked, no fluff, no buzzword hires, got full authorship on each module. The IP belonged to TorqueBridge, but the credit, shared. I refused to let another structure be built in the shadows of silent labor. If we were going to scale, we were going to do it transparently. Meanwhile, Virion was drifting into static. Vendors started reaching out, first quietly, then publicly. They'd been patient, but patience has a shelf life. 2 of them had reached the end. Lucas missed a renewal notice for a high-volume freight client. The client emailed. Twice. No reply. Then called. Still nothing. So they called us. Their message was short. We worked with her before. We're tired of excuses. Can we move this over? We onboarded them the same day. No drama, no pitch deck. Just process. The second client, an inventory balancing partner tied to Viren's B2B food chain, was more delicate. They had legacy dependencies, complex mappings. But when their SLA breach hit the 3rd threshold and no one at Virion had the authority or knowledge to address it, they sent a quiet message to our general inquiries inbox. It landed on my desk. I picked up the phone, dialed the number at the bottom, and said, "This is my name from TorqueBridge. I believe you're looking for continuity." They paused. Then, "I was hoping it was you." We didn't poach, we absorbed, like a vacuum collecting what poor leadership left behind. Inside Virion, I imagine Taylor still trying to decipher the difference between an API call and a coffee order. Lucas probably pacing through meetings trying to spin operational collapse into growing pains. The branding agency likely pitching a new campaign called Resilience is a Journey. But outside that echo chamber, the industry was watching. And they were calling. One vendor even DM'd me. "Didn't know you jumped ship. Explains a lot. Congrats." I replied with a smile emoji and a .zip folder containing onboarding specs. No hard sell, just prep. Back at TorqueBridge, our client retention rate hit 98.2%. Internal failure escalations dropped to nearly 0. And our integration error log? Empty 4 days straight. We didn't celebrate with cake or banners. We just shipped the next release. Every process we rebuilt was no longer tangled in someone else's ego. It lived in documentation, version control, audit logs. My fingerprints were there, sure, but now, so were dozens of others. We weren't building around one person anymore. We were building around the work. The only thing Virion managed to launch that month was a blog post titled Redefining Resilience, written by Taylor, featuring stock photos of bridges and clouds. Meanwhile, our bridge was real, and people were crossing it. TorqueBridge's lobby doesn't try to impress. No waterfall walls, no gimmicky sculpture trying to whisper innovation. Just quiet lighting, clean lines, and a long white wall behind the reception desk where they display quotes from each executive, 1 per role, etched in glass. Mine was installed 3 weeks after I signed the permanent COO contract. It reads, "Every process begins with clarity, and one clear decision." Below that, my name, title, and the date I officially took ownership of the ops division. Clients see it when they walk in. Vendors catch it as they buzz through security. Most of them nod. Some of them smile. A few stop and stare longer than they mean to. I know why. Because it's not just a slogan. It's what saved them. Inside that wall are the systems we built. Documented. scaled. The fallback routes I embedded into our delivery logic now serve as case studies for cross-team resilience. The new team I've mentored, half of whom were junior analysts when I joined, now leads vendor calls like generals. Our response time to infrastructure alerts dropped below 7 minutes, and our last QBR close was 0 escalations. Meanwhile, Virion is trying to remember which end of the wrench to hold. Lucas still posts on LinkedIn weekly, always the same vacant pep talks. Synergy is our compass. Reimagining what logistics can feel like. His most recent one was a photo of him on a beach holding a whiteboard marker, captioned, "Innovation starts where comfort ends." The irony being, that's exactly where I started. What he doesn't post is how 3 of his former vendors now work under Torque Bridge's umbrella. One came over after a misrouted shipment cost them a 6-figure penalty. Another defected after Lucas tried replacing a logistics coordinator with AI flow modeling, and the client ended up with crates of soy milk in a meat freezer. The third? Well, they just asked quietly, "You're with Torque Bridge now, right?" And that was that. Lucas never called again. Never emailed. I imagine it's easier for him to pretend it was all a misunderstanding, that I was difficult, that he chose to lose me. But what I gave Torquebridge wasn't just structure. It was a compass, not based on mood, not guided by vibe, just rooted in decisions made with clarity, consequences measured in silence, and systems built to outlast slogans. At the last industry event, I passed Lucas once in a hallway. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in stature, just diffused, like someone who still hadn't accepted that glitter isn't glue. He gave a polite nod. I nodded back. Nothing more. No smugness, no victory lap, because the truth is, I never needed to win. I just needed to be somewhere that didn't treat competence like a threat. Torquebridge gave me that. And now my signature lives on the wall. Quiet, permanent, unapologetic. I never raised my voice, just my standard.